Welcome to Raw TV, Real and Willing Television. I'm Michael Steiner.
And I'm Rebecca Vargas. And tonight we are doing a part 2 interview with Dr. Richard Harris, who wrote the book One Nation Under Curse. Last week we talked to him about his leadership in the Ku Klux Klan and how he's come out of that and his life is transformed. We're going to talk all about that in this book. Welcome back to the set, and thank you, Dr. Harris, for being with us again. I cannot wait to hear more about your life-changing experience.
Good to be here.
So tell us a little bit more about your book. What's it about? What is the whole purpose and message behind it?
Well, it tells my story of growing up and how racial prejudice just kind of built inside of me. Mm-hmm. And then I ended up falling into the hands of the Ku Klux Klan, rising to be one of their leaders. And then it goes into a lot of detail about what really goes on in the Klan. It is a terrorist organization, and it's one of our homegrown terrorist organizations. So I go into a lot of detail about some of the ways in which they terrorize people. I also go into a lot of the secrets of the Ku Klux Klan, because it is a secret organization. So I reveal a lot of the secrets there. And as well, I talk about the curse of racism passed down, and I actually talk about how the Klan taught me about that. There's things in that book that have never been written before. No one has ever seen them before until I've revealed them, because I don't know of any other Klan leaders who have gotten out of the organization, lived, and then wrote a book explaining exactly what that organization is really all about and what they're really after in this country, and trying to take over the country in favor of white supremacy.
Are you ever worried or scared for your life or your family's life, because you have revealed secrets about them, and them ever finding you or trying to get revenge on that, since the secrets some of them are revealed? And are you ever worried about that?
I've survived 3 assassination attempts on my life.
Wow.
And my family has grown up knowing that we are watched all the time. Everyone knows where I'm at, and so I do take obviously some security measures, but it's extremely dangerous for me to be back in the Midwest. And so I don't make very many trips back to the Midwest or back to Indiana unless I have a lot of security around me at that time. So yes, they're not very happy with me, but writing the book, they haven't been happy with me for years.
Right.
So writing the book was no real big deal about that. Yeah.
Do you have any stories or testimonies of people who've been affected by the book and come out of it, maybe even out of the Klan or out of racial prejudice in general?
I've had a lot of people read the book and write me and tell me that it has helped them really turn their life around. I've had several people write me and tell me that they have accepted Christ as their Savior because they read about how Christ changed my life and my perspective completely. And they felt that if God could do that for me and really take racial prejudice completely out of my life, that He could certainly forgive them for what they had done in their lives, and they've committed their lives to the Lord.
Right.
So would you describe this experience as like God's call on your life? Like He had a plan for that purpose for you to talk to other people? What would you say God's call on your life is now at this point?
I believe that God's call on my life is to help other young people, which I used to be one, to keep from getting trapped in some of the lies that organizations like the Klan. The Klan also operates a lot like gangs. A lot of people a lot of young kids will get into gangs because they're looking for that family that I was looking for. I was looking for acceptance. And that's exactly what the gangs try to prey on, and just really show people that they're important themselves in God's sight, and they don't need to give themselves over to gangs and that kind of thing, but rather they can combat it. And another message is about bullying. That's really what got me so angry in the first place.
Right.
Was I was being bullied, and being bullied is a very important, dangerous thing that we need to address in this country. And so a lot of times when I'm talking on college campuses, I'm talking about things such as bullying. I'm talking about racism, and also about the whole gang idea of staying away, and what parents can do to help their children keep away from these kinds of things.
Right. Well, to kind of change the subject a little bit, how you were a pastor at one point. How did that all work out? Like coming from out of the Ku Klux Klan and being involved in all this and what you guys thought used to be the true Christians, into now actually being a pastor of real Christians. How did that whole thing work out?
Well, right after I got out of the Klan, I felt God's call on my life into pastoral ministry. And I had been a professional public speaker for several years already, so that wasn't very difficult. So I went off to, I attended Indiana Wesleyan University and got my degree in pastoral ministries. And I pastored churches in Illinois, then back up in Indiana, and then down in West Palm Beach. And now I'm pastoring right now in Lakeland, Florida, a small congregation here in Lakeland, Florida as well. When I was in West Palm Beach, I co-pastored a Haitian congregation, which was really, I believe that was God's icing on the cake for me. That's what really completely healed me of the curse of racism, was when I was co-pastoring a Haitian congregation, and suddenly I was the minority, and that really impacted myself, and it impacted my family as well.
It's incredible. And as a professor as well, now you're a professor here at Southeastern University.
Yes.
How did you decide to go into that area, in that career?
Well, I had been a professor at Purdue University when I was pastoring up in Indiana, and so that made me understand that I really enjoyed higher education. Of course, I had also been going around to colleges and universities talking about racism and telling my story. So I pursued a doctorate in adult education, and then a degree in communication, and so I really enjoy academia, because that's where we can really shape the leaders of the next generation, the leaders of the next 20 and 30 and 40 years. That's where we can really shape leaders and hopefully turn out some good, solid Christian leaders in every field, so that we can change this nation, and we can combat things such as racial prejudice.
Yeah.
So, how are you involved in the whole civil rights struggle now, coming out of the integration and all this stuff like that, and you're encouraging youth to get over racial prejudice? What are some ways you've been involved in that fight and in that front?
I've been involved with local organizations, especially working in the area of social activism, social justice, making sure, for instance, in this area, we've worked on some issues with some of the migrant farmers, making sure that they have or migrant workers, because we have a lot of strawberry farms and that kind of thing here in Central Florida, making sure they have proper health care, making sure that the health facilities that the government has set up for them actually have got people who are trained to work and to actually speak Spanish, since most of them speak Spanish. We actually found out that some of the healthcare facilities had no one who spoke Spanish, and yet they were set up for the migrant workers, most of whom speak Spanish. Things such as that, working with the police to make sure that all neighborhoods are being policed and policed fairly. Those are the types of issues that I'm really involved with and are really close to my heart. Justice for everyone. If it's not justice for all, it's not justice at all, has become my motto.
If you had to give advice to someone that may be watching that has been, dealing with racism themselves, like having that curse upon them where they just, like as we saw in the Word on the Street in the previous show, how he felt like it was bred within him and kind of like he's been working on it. What would you say to them? And someone that also is facing prejudice from other people, how would you give encouragement to them? So on both sides.
When I go around speaking at university campuses, one of the things I ask my audience is, raise your hand if you have friends who are of other races. And of course, immediately, around America, every hand goes up. Everyone has friends. I said, now wait a minute. Let me define what friendship is the way I'm looking at it. A friend is not just someone that you work with, someone you go to school with, someone that you associate with outside your home. But a friend is someone who you would actually pick up the phone and call up and say, hey, we're going to have a cookout this weekend at my house. Why don't you bring your family over? Why don't you join us? Or hey, we're going to the movies on Saturday night. You guys want to go with us? That's a friend, someone you would invite into your home and you socialize with. That's a friend. Now, how many of you have friends who are of different races than yourself? And you should see the hands, they plummet. Wow. Because most people, they think that they have friendships and that kind of thing with other races because we live in an integrated society. We go to school with other races, we work with other races. But friendship goes much deeper than that. And if we're going to break down the racial barriers, we have got to start breaking them down in our own personal lives. And that's what some in that clip, that's what they were talking about. Because it's passed down, it's inbred, we are taught racism. And we don't have to teach our kids, actually tell them, I want you to be a racist, I want you to think of your race as better than other races. We don't have to tell them that. But if we don't have any friends who are coming into our home and we're sitting down at the table with them and they're our best buddies, then our children figure it out. My best friend is an African American man, and his family and my family, we celebrate all of the holidays together, and we have for the last 16 years here in Lakeland. And so his kids are my kids, and my kids are his kids, and that's the way we've taught our children, that we don't look at the color of the skin. Those are the kinds of things that I try to get across in my message. We need to build bridges. We need to make it on purpose, and we need to actually reach out and build relationships with other races.
We have some questions that we've gathered from our studio audience to ask Dr. Harris, so why don't you go ahead and start with that?
Okay, first things first. Have you had any contact with the Klan members since you have left?
Yes, I've had some contact. Actually, I had some unusual contact before I was ever out speaking against them. I kept quiet for, I think, about 12, 13 years and didn't really say anything. That kept me alive, I'm sure. But one of my older brothers died in an accident, and the funeral was there in Kokomo, Indiana, where I had grown up and where I ran the Klan from. And actually during the visitation the night before the funeral, Klan members came and visited me, and they wanted to show that they still liked me and would still protect my family for me. They wanted to woo me back into the organization, because up until that time I hadn't done anything but just simply left them. And they wanted to revenge my brother's death and find out who killed him, and they wanted to take care of them, and they were offering to put a hit out on whoever had been driving the car. It was a car accident, and I took about an hour to convince them, no, don't have anything to do with it. Now, after I started speaking out against the Klan, I've had lots of contact with the Ku Klux Klan. Yes. Yes.
Bad contact?
Not good contact. No. Threats, wiretaps on my phone, that that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's crazy. So has it been difficult in forgiving yourself for your past in the Ku Klux Klan, like and all the things that you did and were a part of?
It took me a long time to get to the place where I really fully understood that God forgave me, and then I needed to forgive myself and go on, and I needed to make the rest of my life something positive. And I can't make up for what I did in the organization, but I can certainly try to do much better now, and hopefully try to keep other people out of an organization like that.
Yeah. So what were your duties as Grand Dragon?
The duties of a Grand Dragon are mainly running the ceremonies, running the meetings, and being the PR person. I was the spokesperson for the organization. So I ran everything, but I had a whole group of advisors who were advising me, and they were much older than me because I was only 18 years old.
Right.
And so they were advising me, and they really kind of were running it, but I was the man who actually got to be the voice behind the organization, and really rallying the troops, public speaking, that kind of thing was my main job.
Yeah.
Right. What would you say is the key to getting rid of racism in America?
I think the key to getting rid of racism in America, first of all, starts with the church. Our churches, 11 o'clock in Sunday morning, still the most segregated hour in this country. And churches need to intentionally build bridges to denominations and to other congregations that are not the same as them. We need to start cooperating, and we need to start acting like we really do care for each other. I think when the rest of the nation begins to see the Christians acting like that, I think it will begin to take hold. And then everyone needs to start thinking seriously about building bridges of friendship to people of other races.
Yeah. Okay, so have you ever been treated with prejudice from other people after leaving or being known as an ex-KKK? You talked a little bit about that with the student at school, but were you ever, did people come against you with prejudice because they knew you had been in the KKK?
Oh, I'm not accepted by a lot of people because of my background. Interestingly enough, I'm not accepted by a lot of white people because I'm speaking out against the Klan and against racism. Yeah.
Yeah. So do you plan on writing any other books other than just the One Nation Under Curse?
I do have a book in the works that I'm working on that actually details principles of leadership that I learned as a leader of the terrorist organization. Mm-hmm. So I won't give too much of that away, but they did teach me some things. That organization has been around for over 140 years, and it's still flourishing. So they're doing some things that are right when it comes to leadership. And I believe I've distilled some of their principles that I think people can then transfer over and use in other areas of their life and in their business life.
You talked about your brother earlier in going to his funeral, and the Ku Klux Klan actually saying that they would find the person that killed him and basically kill him. So do you believe that his murder was an accident, or do you think that it was actually purposeful?
I believe that it was probably just a car accident.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I convinced the Klan of, at least as far as I know I did. Mm-hmm. And I told them, don't do anything. I've thought since then that there is the possibility that it wasn't an accident and it really was another attack on the family. But at that time, the Klan wasn't, again, mad at me because I had kept my mouth shut. When I got out of the Klan, the one thing they told me was, you cannot go to the FBI, you cannot tell the police. Well, the police and the FBI were no friends of mine, so I wasn't going to tell them anything about the organization. I just wanted to be gone. I just wanted not to have anything to do with it. And so I just kind of went underground again myself, went off to college, and just pretended like none of it ever happened. And it wasn't until 13 or so years later when I was a professor at Purdue University.
That
One
it
of
all
my
came
one
in.
of my students actually figured out who I was.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So how about the rest of your family in their involvement? You said your grandpa or your great grandpa was a Klan member. Has any other family members been involved since you got involved or beforehand? What was your family's involvement with it?
As far as I know, only my great-grandfather was a member of the Klan, not my grandfather, not my father, and neither one of I have two older brothers, and neither one of them really had anything to do with the organization as well. It was just me that had shown to the organization that I really had deep-seated hatred and bitterness and anger, and they looked at that and they said, that's the kind of vulnerable person that we can use and we can make use of.
So how did your family react when they found out that you were part of the Klan? Or did they ever even
Like
find
your
out?
parents
Like
and
your parents and
brothers.
brothers and stuff?
My mother had died when I was 14.
Okay.
And so my two brothers were much older. One was married, studying to be a doctor, and they were kind of out of the house. My dad was a businessman trying to keep a couple of two different businesses going. I rarely saw him. I basically was raising myself during my high school years. My father asked me one time, he had heard that I was running around with a lot of Klan members. So he asked me, but the Klan taught me always to lie. Anytime that if you lie and it will better the organization, then just go ahead. Lying was a good thing. And so I just lied to my father and said, oh, no, not me, I'm smarter than that. And he never asked again. So again, it's a secret organization, so I kept things pretty much under wraps.
Yeah, which is interesting that they asked you to lie because they're supposedly Christian, therefore believing in the Ten Commandments, which says not to lie. But I mean, they weren't really Christian, so that goes to show that.
Yeah.
But also, I was going to ask about your wife. How did you explain to her that you were involved with that, and now the rest of her life, you and your future kids, which you have now, would have to be, are probably going to be in harm's way, and that they would have to have security all the time? How did you deal with that?
My wife knew when we started dating who I was, but again, at that time, I had no security. I didn't really need any security.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Because I was still keeping my mouth shut.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't until we were married and actually my first child was born before I ever started speaking out against the organization. And so it was only after that we had to start taking some real security precautions.
Yeah.
And how did she feel about you coming out and speaking out publicly and stuff like that, knowing full well of all the risk that it would take?
Well, my wife is a Christian and believes that God, as I do, believes that God has a plan for me now because of my past experiences. Because there are things that I can say that no one else can. They've never experienced the things that I've experienced, and hopefully I can continue to touch people and steer them in the right direction.
You talked about that you have faced 3 assassination attempts on you. Has your daughters ever been in harm's way in that sense, or they have been pretty much protected and okay?
No, they've been pretty much protected. One of the reasons I wrote the book was I wanted my children to understand that we were not just extremely overprotective parents. That there was a real reason why they had the security that they did growing up.
Yeah, I mean, we face that all the time as we grow up. We think our parents are overprotective, but you had a really good reason as to why.
We were, and just looking in, we were extremely overprotective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like to
That'd be interesting trying to
fly
bring
on
a
the
boy
wall
home,
in that
right?
house. Poor girls sometimes. Do you have any more questions on your?
One audience member asked, what is the most important lesson you learned since becoming a Christian, since coming out of that?
I'd say the most important lesson that I've learned is that the Holy Spirit can remove racial prejudice. So many people that I talk with say, and they use this as an excuse, well, that's just the way I was raised. That's the way I was taught when I was young. That's no excuse whatsoever. Because racial prejudice is a sin, and if it's a sin, then God needs to forgive it and you need to repent of it. It's just that simple. And so that's really the most important lesson I think that I've learned, is that God does forgive and God will take away that racial prejudice, no matter how deep-seated. If he can do it for the Grand Dragon of the Klan, I guarantee he can do it for the average person on the street.
Yeah, you summed it up perfectly.
Well, thank you so much,
Thank
Dr. Harris,
you.
for coming on and talking
Thank
with
you.
us and sharing us your whole story and everything. I know it's incredible, and we've learned so
Yeah, I'm
much.
honored, and it really is eye-opening.
you.
It's fantastic. So where can we buy your book? Where can we
Yeah.
get more involved with what you're doing, with the different things that you're trying out?
Okay. Well, obviously, you can get it here at Southeastern University's bookstore. It's available there. Also, Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com. Also, you can go to my own website, which is RichardHarrisOnline.com. And if you order it off of there, you'll get an autographed copy as well. And I always tell people, get the autographed copy, because if they ever succeed in the assassination attempts, it's going to be worth some good
Yes.
money on eBay.
Definitely. Well, thank you for being here, and be sure to check out this book. And if you are facing any prejudice, and if you have this deep-set hatred for another race, you know that God is there to change that. And you've seen it happen in his own life, and it can happen in your life. God can really change your worldview and change your heart. So, as always, don't forget to live it raw.
Go away. As I said, Rachel.
Again.